Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a ranking of my top 5 favorite fantasy villains. I am usually pretty frustrated by the fantasy genre because normally fantasy doesn't provide the biggest, best, most memorable villains that I would prefer. There are certainly some great ones, but they're not they're not what I would, say are standout parts of the genre. But there are a few that are worth talking about. So let's talk about some of them. My number 5 favorite fantasy villain is Shadea Aru from the High Druid of Shannara trilogy. What makes this character stand out so much is the lengths she's willing to go to. The basic premise of the story, without spoiling much, is that Shadea Aru is one of the members of the Druid Council. And she is frustrated because the head of the Druid Council, Grianne Omsford, is this woman who's gone through a tremendous backstory that's too complicated to get into and has been redeemed from this evil life. And everyone feels that Grianne is not the right leader. And so Shadea Aru convinces several of the others to help her, and she banishes Grianne Omsford basically to hell. And that's about as far as I can go without delving too much into spoilers. And it is just a shocking development. And the way she's able to twist and convince everyone to join her, and the way that she is able to take over the Druid Council just so smoothly is just terrific. Very few other fantasy villains have the suave and the quick motion that she has as a villain. I don't necessarily have like a determined picture in my mind, but I definitely know some actresses that I think would do really well as her. And so that is one fantasy villain that I just always really think about. Another fantasy villain that I have, my number 4, is Hrathen from Elantris. Hrathen is a very complicated villain. He is this religious figure that has come into the area of Elantris. I am blanking on the city that's right outside it, but he has come to try to convert all the people to his Fjordell belief system and their religions. And he has a couple of things going on. One is he's in a land that is very hostile to his religion. Another thing about him is he has cronies that work for him in his religious organization that he doesn't particularly care for. And the final thing is that he actually starts to have doubts. And so as a villain, he is incredibly, incredibly complicated. And you still recognize him as the villain, and also you never root for him in the book, yet you understand him, yet you kind of logically are understand why he's doing everything, and you're like, logically that makes sense. A lot of the moves he's making, those are tactical moves that you'd make. And so there's some points that you sympathize with him, but overall it's mostly, I understand this villain, and it makes sense. And like with a lot of Brandon Sanderson stuff, there's big reveals on who the villains are. Hrathen, from the get-go, he's going to be the main villain of this story. And it's just entertaining seeing him be foiled by this young princess, and it's like, come on, you're supposed to be ditzy, and it turns out it's just a feint that she's really competent and she's really brilliant politically and religiously. And so I love all of Hrathen's complexities that are in this book. Now I go from my next villain I'll talk about is, I'm going from a villain who was super complex, Hrathen, to a villain who's super one-dimensional, and that is the Morgawr from the Voyage of the Geralt of Shannara trilogy, particularly the Morgawr book. And the Morgawr is on the back of this book, and he is terrifying. The Geralt of Shannara trilogy is my favorite of all the Shannara series because it's just masterfully done. It's the most tightly connected Shannara storyline. But what makes it so great is there are 3 villains in this trilogy. The first book, the villains are throughout the trilogy, but the primary villain of the first book is the Isle Witch, which is why it's called that. The primary villain of the second book is called Anthrax, and the primary villain of the third book is Morgawr. And Morgawr does horrifying things in this book, and he makes my blood curdle whenever he's on the screen. I am freaked out. I am mad. I am also really intrigued when he's on he has political machinations, but he is just an evil dude, and he's an evil dude. There is zero sympathy, zero desire for understanding. With him, it's just, you are bad, and it's kind of like Sauron from Lord of the Rings, but he's even more just despicable. He's just despicable. And the things he does in this book, they're just so creepy. And so there's no other villain that I'm like, man, that villain terrified me in fantasy. Because fantasies, the villains aren't supposed to be terrifying. The villains are supposed to just, be a problem for your main characters. But when they stand out, when they're so terrifying like this, it kind of delves into scary type stuff. And it was effective. So that's why the Morgawr is my number 3. Getting into my number 2 favorite villain is a villain that is rarely talked about, but I feel like if I talk about him, people will roll their eyes because I talk about this book series all the time, and that is Rai Ahten from the Rune Lords. Rai Ahten is this character who desires power and has no qualms in his goal to achieve it. And he is willing to take whatever endowments he needs. He'll take whatever power, not just like metaphorical, political power. No, he is literally taking power from people and giving it to himself, even if it means it's sucking out years of his life. He knows he's not going to live that long, but he's okay with it because he has goals and he's going to achieve those goals, darn it. And so he takes all these endowments and he just becomes this awesome fighter with awesome powers, and he is able to just dominate on the battlefield. His voice is so strong that he's able to just make everyone quiver in their boots. And he is this character that his entrance in this first book was brilliant. And the way that he has a complex story of in the first book, you hate him. In the second book, you still hate him, but you understand him. And in the third and fourth book, you hate him still, and you're frustrated by him, but you also sort of sympathize with him, and also he changes a little bit. And you see the full storyline that this villain, Rai Ahten, goes through. And it's just brilliant. And from his opening scene to his finale scene, anytime he was on the page, I was thinking, all right, stuff's about to go down. This is an awesome epic level villain. So I always enjoyed reading about Rai Ahten. The final villain I'll talk about is kind of hard because he's kind of not a villain, but he's a villain. And that is Tywin Lannister from the Song of Ice and Fire books. I'm using the Game of Thrones specifically because that's the most known one, and also I couldn't remember which book Tywin has the most to do. I feel like Tywin has the most in the third book, A Storm of Swords, but I'm not entirely sure because he has a lot. I remember him more in the TV show because the TV show is more solidly in my mind than the book series was. But I'm also talking about the books because it's a book channel. But Tywin is this character who is so Machiavellian in the way he's achieving power, the way he's able to brilliantly set up a chessboard, the way he's able to recognize talent, the way he's able to keep his friends close and enemies closer is just great. He's able to outmaneuver virtually every enemy. He survives every war just about. He's able to say, all right, these people, they rebelled against me, but I can use them to stop this other rebellion. So I'm going to delay punishing them and instead bring them into the fold, and they're going to be a barrier to protect my troops, and their troops will actually be the ones to fight the battle. And he's like, instead, I'm going to marry my daughter to this person and my son to this person, and it's going to strengthen these family lines, and it's going to mean that we get the North, and we get the West, and we get the South, and just every political move he makes is very calculated and very competent. Every move he makes you think, yeah, that's the right move. If I was forced to serve as an advisor to the king, I would basically give him all the advice that Tywin Lannister gives him, because Tywin is a brilliant tactician. And there's a few times in here where I recognize Tywin's a villain, but I almost started to root for him because I liked having a competent character who was in charge and who was doing everything the right way. And so Tywin is this character that I found I loved every time he was on the page and on the screen. I thought that the actor who portrayed Tywin was the perfect actor to portray him. Every role he's been in that I've seen has been great. Charles Dance is a terrific actor, and he was great in The Crown, and he was great in this, and there were some other movies that I've seen him in recently. He just has this air of superiority in his characters, and he just gets it. And he was the perfect choice for Tywin. And I love Machiavelli, and I love Machiavellian politics, so Tywin is just the perfect type of villain for me. If I could take, some of the, if we could just make him a little bit more scary, like make him more creepy, oh man, that would be the sweet spot. So that's my ranking of my favorite fantasy villains. If you have favorite fantasy villains, let me know in the comments section down below. Are there any I missed? Are there any from book series I haven't read that you think, oh, if I read this will really change my mind? Let me know all that in the comments section down below. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.